The knock at Daniel Carter's door was supposed to bring safety. Instead, it unleashed a truth he never expected. A widowed single dad, haunted by war and raising his little girl alone, thought hiring a bodyguard would protect her from the shadows stalking their home. But when the woman stepped inside, a scar on her arm revealed a shocking secret. She was the soldier he had once saved on the battlefield. And now, his past had come back to claim them all. Daniel Carter's mornings were always the same. The shrill buzz of his alarm, the creak of the old floorboards as he stepped into the hallway, and the quiet pause outside his daughter's room. Emma, just 8 years old, slept curled up with her worn teddy bear, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. That small sight gave him the strength to face each day, but it also pierced him with the reminder of all that was gone. His wife, Laura, had fought bravely against the cancer that claimed her 3 years ago, leaving Daniel to raise Emma alone. He had faced combat zones and enemy fire without flinching, yet nothing had prepared him for the slow devastation of watching the woman he loved slip away. Even now, her laughter echoed in the walls of their modest Denver home, a ghost he both clung to and tried to escape. By day, Daniel worked as an engineer at a heavy machinery factory. His military training made him disciplined and precise, but the job was unremarkable and exhausting. He often came home with grease on his hands and aching muscles, but he never let Emma see his weariness. Dinner was always on the table, even if it was simple pasta or reheated leftovers. Bedtime stories were never skipped, no matter how late. He clung to routine like armor. Yet beneath the surface, cracks had begun to show. Shadows from his military service crept back at night. Explosions in his dreams, the echo of gunfire, and the sight of brothers lost. Some mornings he woke drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Emma noticed. She would tilt her head with innocent worry and ask, "Daddy, did you have a bad dream again?" He always smiled and lied, but inside, the memories ate away at him. The unease of memory was soon joined by a new threat. It started with small things, an unfamiliar car idling near the schoolyard, a folded piece of paper tucked under his windshield with the words, "You can't outrun the past." At first, Daniel dismissed them as coincidences or cruel pranks. But then came the phone calls, silence on the other end, the faint sound of breathing before the line went dead. Once, while Emma was on the swings, Daniel saw a man in a dark jacket watching her too intently. He rushed over, but by the time he reached the spot, the stranger was gone. That night, his old instincts screamed at him. This was no random harassment. Something or someone from his past was circling closer. The fear gnawed at him, sharper than any memory. He found himself checking locks 3, 4 times before bed, staring at shadows in the yard, his pulse spiking at the smallest creak. Emma began asking why he looked at the windows so much, why he seemed so far away. Daniel tried to shrug it off, but the truth was unavoidable. His daughter was in danger, and his vigilance alone wasn't enough. He had faced enemies before, but this was different. He had one life to guard, one fragile soul he could not afford to lose. For days he wrestled with the decision. To hire a bodyguard felt like weakness, an admission that he wasn't enough. He remembered Laura's last days in the hospital, when he had promised her he would protect Emma no matter what. How could he hand that responsibility to a stranger? Yet what kind of father would he be if his pride put Emma at risk? Late one night, sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills and Emma's scattered crayons, Daniel made the call. A contact from his old unit owed him a favor. "I need someone," he said, his voice rough. "Not for me, for my daughter." 3 days later, there was a knock at the door. Daniel braced himself, expecting a hulking ex-soldier or some mercenary type. Instead, when he opened the door, a woman stood there. She was tall, her leather jacket fitting like a second skin, her eyes sharp with vigilance yet softened by something unspoken. A faint scar curved along her temple, barely visible unless the light caught it. She extended her hand with steady composure. "Rachel," she said, "I'm here for the job." Emma peeked from behind Daniel's leg, wide-eyed and curious. Rachel crouched down, her voice gentle. "You must be Emma." The little girl nodded, then surprised her father by asking, "Do you like pancakes?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard, but Rachel smiled faintly. "I love pancakes." In that moment, Emma slipped her small hand into Rachel's without hesitation. Daniel felt a strange mix of relief and unease. He had opened his home to a stranger, someone who carried both strength and mystery. He didn't know what shadows Rachel brought with her, or what her presence would stir in his carefully guarded life. All he knew was that his quiet world had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. Rachel's presence in the Carter home shifted the air almost immediately. She arrived before sunrise each day, moving with a soldier's efficiency, checking locks, scanning the street, and walking Emma to school as if every step might hide danger. At first, Daniel kept her at arm's length, bristling whenever she made suggestions. When she recommended changing the walking route, he snapped, "I've kept Emma safe this long. I know my neighborhood." Rachel didn't argue, only met his glare with calm resolve. "Your neighborhood isn't the problem," she replied evenly. The words stung, not because they weren't true, but because he hated admitting he needed her. Emma, however, saw Rachel differently. Within days, the little girl had adopted her as a confidant. She would chatter during breakfast, tugging Rachel into pancake contests, and scribble drawings of me, Daddy, and Rachel in colorful crayon. Daniel pretended to be annoyed, but when he found one tucked under his coffee cup, a child's sketch of 3 figures, holding hands beneath the sun, he folded it carefully and placed it in his jacket pocket. The warmth it brought embarrassed him almost as much as it soothed. There were small moments that unsettled him too. One evening, Emma begged Rachel to teach her self-defense moves. Daniel watched from the porch as Rachel gently guided Emma through basic stances, showing her how to block and push away an attacker. Emma's laughter rang out as she exaggerated each move, but Daniel's chest tightened. Pride mingled with sorrow. His daughter should have been learning piano or dance, not how to fend off shadows because her father's past had come back to haunt them. Despite his resistance, Daniel began noticing things about Rachel he hadn't expected. She was disciplined yet tender with Emma, sharp-eyed yet surprisingly gentle in quiet moments. One night, after Emma had gone to bed, Daniel offered Rachel a cup of coffee. They sat on the porch, the cool Colorado air carrying the faint scent of pine. Silence stretched between them, not hostile but weighted. When Rachel reached for her mug, her jacket sleeve slid back, exposing the jagged scar on her forearm. Daniel's breath caught. The memory struck him like a flashbang. Years ago, in the blistering heat of a desert ambush, he had pulled a wounded soldier from wreckage, her arm torn by shrapnel, her voice a faint plea, "Don't let me die here." He had carried her through smoke and fire, but when he was airlifted out, he never knew what became of her. Now under the porch light, the scar glared back at him with undeniable truth. His voice trembled. "That scar, it was you." Rachel's fingers stilled on the mug. Her composure cracked, if only for a moment. She met his eyes, and her voice was soft but steady. "I remember your voice. You dragged me out when everyone else was gone. I thought you were just another ghost from that day. And now, here we are." For a moment, the world stilled. Daniel's pulse pounded in his ears. Gratitude, confusion, and fear collided inside him. Of all the people who could have answered his call for help, it was her, the woman tied to his most haunting memory. Fate, or perhaps cruel coincidence, had delivered her back into his life. Neither of them spoke further, but the silence carried weight. Daniel lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, hearing Laura's voice in his memory, urging him to protect Emma at all costs. But now Rachel's face overlapped that memory, a reminder that life was never as simple as vows whispered to the dead. He couldn't decide if Rachel's reappearance was a blessing or a curse. The next morning, Emma came skipping into the kitchen, her hair tangled from sleep. "Daddy," she chirped, "I dreamed Rachel was a superhero. She saved me from the bad guys." Rachel laughed lightly, but Daniel felt a shiver crawl up his spine. Children's dreams had a way of brushing against the truth. As he looked at Rachel across the table, her scar hidden again beneath her sleeve, Daniel realized that Emma's dream was more than a child's fancy. In ways none of them could yet see, Rachel was about to save them all, but at a cost they couldn't yet imagine. The revelation of Rachel's scar lingered like smoke after a fire. For days, Daniel found himself stealing glances at her, his mind replaying the battlefield where their lives had first intersected. He wanted to believe her presence now was fate's strange way of binding threads together, but unease twisted in his chest. He had questions, and Rachel seemed to sense it. One evening, when Emma was tucked in bed, Rachel finally spoke. Her voice was low, almost reluctant. "You deserve to know why I live the way I do." She told him about the years after the ambush, how she had stumbled upon shipments of military weapons being funneled off the record, destined for people they had once fought against. How her superiors' men with polished shoes and hollow eyes had dismissed her concerns and then turned on her when she refused to stay quiet. "They made me the liability," she said, her jaw tight, "and they made sure I knew it. The threat started immediately. An accident here, a shadow there. By the time I left the service, I was already marked. I've been hunted ever since." Daniel felt the air thicken in his lungs. His instincts pieced it together, the silent phone calls, the strange men lurking near Emma, the threatening notes. It wasn't paranoia. It was Rachel's enemies closing in, and by hiring her, he had pulled them into his home. His voice came out raw, edged with anger. "So all this, the danger circling my daughter, it's because of you." Rachel didn't flinch. "Not just me, you too, Daniel. Briggs and his men haven't forgotten. You saved me that day, and it ruined their plans. You're part of this whether you want to be or not." Her words cut him to the bone. Memories he had buried clawed back. Briggs, the commanding officer who had once barked orders with iron precision. His name whispered in suspicion, but never spoken aloud. Daniel had tried to leave those suspicions behind when he buried his uniform, but here it was dragged into his living room, threatening his daughter. Daniel began pacing, his hands gripping his hair. "My wife's gone. Emma is all I have. And now you're telling me the people who killed careers, who killed soldiers, are coming for her too?" His voice cracked, the old soldier breaking under the weight of fatherhood. Rachel reached out, but he pulled back as though her touch burned. "I thought bringing you here would protect her. Instead, I've painted a target on her back." The argument escalated until silence became the only weapon left. Finally, Daniel said the words he hadn't wanted to admit. "You need to leave." His voice was cold, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside. Rachel's lips parted as though to fight, but then she caught sight of Emma's crayon drawings on the fridge, 3 figures hand in hand, with family scrawled above in crooked letters. Her shoulders slumped. "I never wanted this for her," she whispered. Then she gathered her jacket and walked out into the night. Daniel closed the door, his hand trembling on the knob. Emma padded into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, where's Rachel?" she asked. He forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "She had to go, sweetheart." Emma frowned, retreating to her room. Later, when Daniel checked on her, he found a folded piece of paper on his pillow. It was one of Emma's drawings again, this time with Rachel in the middle, holding both their hands. In the corner, Emma had written in uneven letters, "Don't let her go." Sleep came fitful and short. Near midnight, the sound of breaking glass shattered the fragile silence. Daniel snatched the baseball bat from beside his bed and sprinted down the hall. 2 figures, masked and armed, slipped through the kitchen window. Adrenaline roared to life. He swung hard, catching one across the jaw. The other lunged with a knife, But Daniel's reflexes honed years ago in battle took over. He disarmed the man with brutal precision, the clash loud enough to wake neighbors. Sirens wailed in the distance, but the intruders fled before police arrived. Clutching Emma in his arms afterward, Daniel whispered promises he wasn't sure he could keep. His chest ached with the truth. Rachel's enemies were real, and they had already crossed his threshold. Yet the fury inside him only hardened his resolve. Tomorrow, he told himself, he would protect Emma alone. He would never let Rachel or her haunted past near them again. But deep down, as Emma's tears dampened his shirt, he knew the story was far from over. The morning Emma was taken began like any other pancakes on the griddle. Laughter at the table, Daniel trying to pretend their world was still normal. He dropped her off at school with a kiss on her forehead and a whispered promise. "I'll see you this afternoon." But that afternoon never came. When he arrived, the teacher's face was pale, her hands trembling. Emma left with a man who said he was family. "We thought you sent him." The words splintered Daniel's world. His knees nearly buckled, rage and terror surging together. He knew instantly this wasn't a mistake. This was the enemy reaching for the only part of him left vulnerable. He called the police, but bureaucracy moved too slowly, their assurances hollow. Hours mattered, minutes mattered, and Daniel's instincts told him Emma didn't have much of either. Alone in his kitchen, fists clenched, he cursed himself for driving Rachel away. That's when the phone rang. A voice he thought he wouldn't hear again. "Rachel." "I heard what happened," she said, breathless but steady. "Daniel, listen to me. We can find her. But you can't do this without me." Pride dissolved instantly under the weight of fear. "Where?" he demanded. Within the hour, they met at an abandoned rail yard. Rachel spread out maps and grainy surveillance photos she had been collecting. "They're holding her here," she said, pointing to an old warehouse on the edge of the city. "It's Briggs. I've tracked his movements for weeks. He's using this site as a hub. He won't kill her immediately. She's leverage against you and against me. That buys us time, but not much." Daniel studied her face. Bruised by guilt yet lit by determination, she looked every inch the soldier he remembered dragging from fire years ago. This time, it was his daughter she was risking everything to save. "Then we go tonight," he said. They moved as a unit, instincts aligning without words. Daniel built a crude signal tracker from old engineering parts. Locking onto Emma's school bag, GPS chip, something he had installed out of paranoia months earlier. Rachel checked her weapons, her movements precise, but Daniel noticed her hands trembled just slightly before she steadied them. "She's not just your fight, Daniel," Rachel said quietly as they approached the compound. "She's mine too now." Inside the warehouse, shadows stretched long under dim lights. They slipped through a side entrance, disarming guards with silent efficiency. Daniel's heartbeat thundered when he heard Emma's muffled sobs. They found her bound to a chair, her eyes wide with terror until they met his. "Daddy!" she cried, her voice ragged. Relief and fury surged through him all at once. He rushed to her, cutting through the ropes, whispering, "I've got you, baby. I've got you." But the moment was shattered by a slow clap echoing through the rafters. From the shadows stepped Colonel Briggs, his hair grayer but his smirk venomous. "Carter, of course it would be you." Daniel froze. Memories collided, the same Briggs who had once pulled him from enemy fire, saving his life years before. The man he had owed everything to was now the one threatening his daughter. "You," Daniel whispered, betrayal clawing at his throat. Briggs sneered. "You never understood the bigger picture. I kept you alive because you were useful." He pinned Briggs to the ground, his fist cocked, ready to end it. In that moment, the memory of being pulled to safety by Briggs years ago clashed with the reality of his betrayal. His chest heaved, torn between justice and vengeance. Emma's small voice cut through the haze. "Daddy, please." Daniel froze, looking into her tear-streaked face. Slowly, he let Briggs live, binding his hands with ropes scavenged from the warehouse. Rachel, pale and bleeding, cradled Emma with her good arm, whispering, "You're safe now." When police sirens wailed outside, Daniel carried Emma in one arm and half-supported Rachel with the other. Under the flashing lights, with Briggs finally in custody, Daniel realized the truth. Fate had twisted his life with betrayals and losses, but in that crucible, he had found something unbreakable: a daughter's trust, a woman's sacrifice, and his own rediscovered strength. The weeks after the warehouse rescue unfolded like a blur of hospital corridors, courtroom hearings, and long nights filled with whispered prayers. Rachel's shoulder wound healed slowly, each stitch a reminder of the bullet she had taken for Emma. Daniel stayed by her side through every appointment, bringing her coffee, adjusting her pillows, and sometimes just sitting silently, watching her breathe. Emma rarely left her side either, curling up in hospital chairs, reading storybooks aloud with her small, steady voice. The three of them, bound by trauma and survival, began to feel like something more than circumstance. They felt like family. Colonel Briggs's arrest dominated the news. Footage of him in handcuffs, head bowed, played on every channel. Investigators uncovered a sprawling network of corruption that reached deep into the military's upper ranks. Rachel's testimony, paired with the evidence she had risked years to collect, dismantled the operation. The three of them, bound by trauma and survival, began to feel like something more than circumstance. They felt like family. Colonel Briggs's arrest dominated the news. Footage of him in handcuffs, head bowed, played on every channel. Investigators uncovered a sprawling network of corruption that reached deep into the military's upper ranks. Rachel's testimony, paired with the evidence she had risked years to collect, dismantled the operation. Her name, once whispered in suspicion, was now linked to courage and integrity. Yet for Rachel, public vindication mattered less than the quiet healing at home. For the first time in years, she was not running. She could exhale. Daniel, however, faced his own battle. The rescue had unlocked old wounds he thought buried, the faces of soldiers he couldn't save, the betrayal of a man he once admired. Nightmares returned, sharper than before, and he woke drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Unlike before, he didn't hide it. One night when Emma found him trembling on the porch, he admitted, "Daddy has scary dreams sometimes. But I'm working on it." Soon after, he began attending therapy at the VA, encouraged by Rachel, who told him healing wasn't weakness but strength. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to believe her. Emma became their anchor. One afternoon, she pulled out a crayon drawing she had made after the rescue. It showed 4 figures: herself, her father, Rachel, and above them, a glowing outline labeled Mom. When she handed it to Rachel, she whispered, "Now you're part of us too." Mom would like that. Rachel's eyes filled with tears, and Daniel's throat tightened. That simple drawing carried more truth than any words he could have spoken. It was Emma's way of granting permission, of stitching Laura's memory into the family they were becoming. Life slowly settled into something resembling normal. Rachel moved into their home under the guise of recovery, but even when her strength returned, she stayed. She cooked with Daniel, sparred gently with Emma in the backyard, and helped with homework at the kitchen table. The walls that had once echoed with silence now brimmed with laughter. For Daniel, it was as if Laura's absence had left a hollow that Rachel and Emma's bond gently filled, not erasing the past but building upon it. One crisp autumn evening, Rachel surprised Daniel with an idea. "What if we built something?" she asked, her gaze steady as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "A foundation for families like our single parents, veterans, widows. We could name it after Lovra. She deserves to be remembered, not just as your wife, but as part of what saved us all." Daniel was stunned into silence, then deeply moved. The thought of honoring Lavra while giving back to others felt like the closure he had long needed. Together, they began drafting plans, reaching out to contacts, and turning grief into purpose. Months later, a modest community center buzzed with activity as the Larva Carter Foundation officially opened. Veterans, widows, and children filled the room, their faces carrying both sorrow and hope. Emma, dressed in a simple white dress, stood proudly between Daniel and Rachel, holding their hands as she cut the ribbon. Cameras flashed, applause echoed, but for Daniel the moment was not about recognition, it was about redemption. His family's pain had birthed something that might heal others. That night, after the celebration ended, the three of them stood beneath the glow of the porch light outside their home. Emma leaned sleepily against Rachel's side, clutching her new drawing. Daniel slipped his arm around them both. "I thought my life ended when Larva died," he admitted softly. "But maybe it was just waiting for this." Rachel touched his hand, her voice low but certain. "We don't always get to choose our battles, Daniel. But we do get to choose what we build afterward." As the autumn wind rustled the leaves around them, Daniel looked at the two people who had become his reason to fight again. A soldier turned single dad, a survivor turned bodyguard, and a child whose love stitched their broken pieces together, stood as a family stronger, whole, and ready to face whatever came next. In the end, Daniel discovered that true strength wasn't found in the battles he once fought, but in the love he chose to protect. Rachel's sacrifice, Emma's innocent faith, and the legacy of Laura's memory wove together into a new beginning, proof that even the most broken hearts can be made whole again. Their story reminds us that family is not only about blood, but about the people who stand with us when life tests us most. And sometimes the past returns not to haunt us, but to heal us. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more soul-stirring tales, and help us spread stories of love, courage, and second chances.